Hello, and welcome to another crochet pattern tutorial. I am very excited because today I get to show you how to make your very own pair of these Dream Weaver mesh shorts. Now these shorts are designed to pair very well with the Dream Weaver mesh tank top that you can also find a tutorial for. And you can also get both of the patterns for the tank top and these shorts on my website or in my Ravelry or my Etsy shops. This video is meant to be a supplemental support for the written pattern, so please make sure you go and get a copy of those. I will have links for them in the description box below. So today, to make your shorts, you are going to need some supplies. The first thing we will start with is the yarn. So I have two yarns here. The main yarn you will be using is going to be a fingering weight yarn. So I have here a fingering weight cotton yarn. This is 100% mercerized cotton. This is the Lion Brand Silk City 5/2 cotton cone. And what I really love about this is that each cone has 2,100 yards of yarn on it. So when I made this pair of shorts, notice how much more yarn I still have left. Like I did use quite a bit from here, but there's so much yarn left on here. So if you get one of these cones, you can definitely make multiple pairs of shorts and maybe even make your own matching Dreamweaver tank top with it as well and still have plenty of yarn to spare. For today's video, I'm going to be using a different fingering weight yarn just because I do want to make a second pair in a different color from this one. So when you see that one, just know it is the same weight of yarn. It gauges up the same. So, any fingering weight yarn you want to use to be able to get that, mesh pattern is going to be good. Now, the other thing I have here is just some spare this is just acrylic worsted weight yarn because you'll need something to make the cord. And I found that using a worsted weight yarn and just like a little amount of it is enough to make this nice kind of thicker cord to go along with it. Now, if you don't have any spare worsted weight yarn just lying around, you can also just take your fingering weight yarn or any fingering weight yarn you have and hold 3 strands of it together as you make your cord. And that will also be able to create your drawstring here. Now, in addition to the yarn, you're also going to need some hooks. I have 2 hooks here. The main one that I used is a size USF 3.75 millimeter hook. But what's really important is that you just use a hook that matches the gauge. So because this is going to be a measurement-based pattern, gauge is going to be very important because the calculations used in the pattern are based off of that particular gauge. So if you are using a hook and it's not gauging correctly, definitely make sure you size up or down to match. My second hook I'm using is a USD 3.25 millimeter. I used this to match the gauge in the ribbing for my waistband. So there's going to be 2 different gauges, one for the mesh, one for the ribbing. And again, it doesn't really matter which hook you use as long as it creates the correct gauge for your waistband. And in the written pattern, I do provide instructions on what gauge is needed to be able to make the calculations come out correctly. The other things you're going to need are some supplies. This one may be a little bit less familiar to you, but I have here a lucite fork. So what this is a tool for creating I-cords to create our drawstring. I will be demonstrating how to use this in this video, but in the pattern as well as the description box below, I do indicate links to other tools that can create these I-cords for you, including a latch hook tool and what's called a knitting mill, where you just kind of crank it and it just feeds the yarn into it and creates it. I personally really just enjoy using a lucite fork because it's just a little bit more fun and, it's kind of a fun little meditative activity to use. Notice that it does have the brand of Furls here. Unfortunately, Furls no longer makes these lucite forks. I know, it's so disappointing, but I do provide a link in the pattern and in the description box for where you can find other manufactured lucite forks if you're interested in getting one like mine. Some other things you'll need are stitch markers. So there are going to be two places where you are going to need stitch markers along the side for hip shaping. And then I have one here that's just kind of an optional third one that if you want to mark the beginning of your rounds, then you can use that to indicate where you start and stop your rounds. So that's totally up to you if you want that third stitch marker. But these other 2 are absolutely necessary to be able to know exactly where you're going to be doing some increasing. The other tools you'll need: measuring tape, Very important for this pattern, since as I mentioned before, it is a measurement-based pattern. So we're going to need a measuring tape to measure ourselves, as well as to measure our garment to make sure that everything is matching up exactly as we need it to. We're also going to need a yarn needle and some scissors. This is just to weave in our ends. We are not doing any seaming on this. This is a totally seamless project. So we are going to be working it from the waistband and the drawstring, and then we'll be folding it over and sealing it up, and then working top down. We'll create the main body with the hip shaping of our shorts, and then eventually when we get here to the bottom, we split with a chain, work one leg, and then we go back and join and work another leg separately, and then we just weave in our yarn ends. So again, no seaming, very basic, easy construction. A final thing you may need that's not pictured here is blocking mats and blocking pins. Those are going to be used to be able to wet block and shape your shorts so that they can like kind of open up this mesh pattern so you can get them to fit the measurements that you really need, and just give a little bit more of a laundered, polished look to your shorts. Now with all of those supplies, let's go ahead and get started with the drawstring using our cord maker. For this video, I'm going to be using this hand-dyed merino silk blend fingering weight in the color Silver Fox. So with the silver, I decided that I wanted to grab some of this just navy blue acrylic yarn that I just got from Hobby Lobby that just was in my stash. I'm going to use that to create my drawstring cord because I think it creates a nice little like dark light contrast there. So to do this, if you are wanting to use a lucite fork like what I'm using here, I'm just going to be doing a little demonstration of what to do. So if you do use a lucite fork, then you're going to take your end of your yarn here and you're just going to stick that through that little hole through the front. And then as it comes out the back, you just kind of feed it through and you're just going to grasp it and the handle with your non-dominant hand. Then, with your dominant hand, we are going to create a figure 8 around these two prongs going through the center right here. So coming through the front between the two prongs, I'm going to wrap around one of the prongs, go back through the center, and wrap around the other prong back through the center. And it creates that little figure 8 that you can kind of see right there. Once I have this figure 8 formed, I then repeat that by going around the right side. And then I'm going to take my hand and grasp my yarn at the same time. And we can see here we've got these two yarn strands here on this right prong. So what I'm going to do is use my finger to grab this bottom strand and pull it over the right prong. And let it go. Then I'm going to take my yarn back in my other hand and kind of pull that a little tight. And then go around the left prong here, grasp the yarn with my left hand here, and again we're going to now have two strands, but this time on my left prong. We'll repeat that same motion where we'll take this bottom strand and lift it over the one on top and over the prong on the left here. Now my hand will get kind of in the way for me to be able to do this. I'm going to try to do my best to show you without blocking, but I can't. It's kind of hard to do there. But very gently, just pull it over that prong and then let it go. And now you're back to one strand on that side. Then we're going to grab our yarn again and then just repeat that motion. So we're going to kind of pull. Notice that it kind of tightened here in the middle. We're then just going to repeat that again around the right prong. We're going to go around through the middle, grasp it, and then we're going to take that bottom strand, move it over that top strand and off of the prong, pull to tighten, and then go around the left one. And you just keep repeating those motions over and over. And you just tighten it again. And you just do that. Over and over again. And eventually, we can see here in the middle, it's starting to form the beginning of our cord. And it creates this nice, lovely I cord that's this kind of like squarish shape. And it's very secure, but it's also going to be nice and flexible, just like a regular drawstring cord will be. And what's great about this is that this is a pretty repetitive and meditative task, and is also simple enough that if you wanted to, you can maybe get like your child to work on it or have a friend do this part for you, because it doesn't require any major technical skills. And it actually goes pretty quickly. Though I will say not as quickly as if you did use a machine like this. You could also, if you are, bi-stitchual and you also do any kind of knitting, you could also go ahead and knit yourself an I-cord using your own knitting needles if you don't want to use a lucite fork or some other technique. It's really just up to you, however you want to make the cord. But the end goal is that you're going to make your cord as long as what it tells you in your pattern based on your waist measurement. So this is what's going to go around the waist. And then it's going to be some additional inches or centimeters, depending on how big your waist is. You're going to need some extra so that you have enough room in the front to be able to tie your cord. Yeah, and look at that. I have not been working on it for too terribly long, and already I've got like what, 1.5 inches of cord? Yeah. So I'm going to continue working my cord up off camera, and then I will meet you back to talk about how to begin the waistband. To work the waistband, we are going to be using our smaller hook and our main color of yarn, our fingering weight yarn. And we're just going to be doing a basic single crochet ribbing. And then eventually we're going to be folding it over. So to do this, we start by making a chain. So we'll make our slip knot, place that on our hook. And then we're going to chain the number of chains needed for what's listed in the pattern. All right, and then once I do that, we are then going to find the second chain from our hook. So the one on our hook doesn't count. This kind of little tight one is our first one, and then there's our second one. And in that second chain from our hook, we're just going to work a single crochet. So to do that, we will insert our hook through that chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we will yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And our first single crochet is now made. After that, we will then work a single crochet into every chain across. All right, I am finishing up with my last 2 single crochets. And there we are. And now that our first row is done, we're about to start our second row. So to do our second row, we're going to turn and do a chain 1. So there's my chain 1 and my turn. And then we're going to be doing our single crochet ribbing by working single crochets into the back loops only of our previous stitch row. So when we look at the top of our single crochets, we can see we've got our loop closest to us and the loop farthest away. Instead of inserting our hook under both of those, we're just going to insert it through the one farthest away from us. So go between those loops through just that back loop, yarn over, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through two. And then we just keep repeating this into every single crochet across. So working through just those back loops, we're going to single crochet until we reach the end. All right, working my final single crochet. Sometimes that one can be a little tricky because that first single crochet does kind of turn away from us a lot, but if you just turn your work towards you, you can see very clearly those two loops there. You can also make sure you count to make sure you have the same number of stitches that you started with, or a trick that I can oftentimes offer to beginners or fairly new crocheters, or even experienced ones can sometimes do this. If you place a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of each row, you'll always know when you reach the end. So then when you turn and you work your first stitch, you just place your stitch marker in it and it just keeps track of it all the way across. Okay, so once you work row 2, where you've worked single crochets in the back loop only, you just simply repeat that by chaining 1, turning, and working in through the back loops of the previous row. And you just keep doing that over and over. And because we're alternating, working in the back loop on each row, it's going to create that nice textured ribbing, perfect for our waistband. Now in your written pattern, it's going to tell you how to calculate the number of rows that you will need in total to fit around your waist properly. So do make sure that you take time to calculate that all out, and then that will help you figure out how many times you need to repeat these rows. There's also one more component to the ribbing, and I am going to be showing you here in a moment. Okay, so I finished that row. Now, obviously I would need to work up way more rows to get to this point, but I'm just going to demonstrate it here so that when you do reach that point, you know exactly what to do. So because we have our drawstring, we're going to need to have some openings for the drawstring to pull through. So in the pattern, it's going to, again, provide some calculations for how you figure out where to place your openings. But regardless of where they're going to be placed, you're going to work them the exact same way. So depending on what row number you're on, that's going to affect where we place the opening, whether it's going to be near the beginning of the row or near the end of the row. So for example, let's say I'm on an odd row. So that means that it's going to be towards the end of my row. So what that means is that I'm going to just work my ribbing stitches the number of times it lists in the pattern. Then we're going to create our opening by doing a chain 3, skipping the next 3 stitches, and then in the last 3 stitches we're going to do our last 3 single crochets in the back loop only. And that creates this little opening that's just the right size for our cord to fit through to create our drawstring. When we work the next row, we're simply going to work our single crochets through the back loop only like normal. So I'll do that in these first 3. And then when I get to this chain space, I simply work my next 3 single crochets into that chain. So there's not really like a good way of doing just like through the back loop only, and it doesn't really matter. So I just go through the space itself and just work 3 single crochets. Then we'll be back to our normal stitches. So then we just continue by working in the back loop only of each of the single crochets across. And then you've got this nice, secure little opening right there. Now, if you're working the next opening, so you're going to have two openings, you're going to have one that is going to be at the first one, and then you're going to have a second one that's going to be on the same side. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to indicate how you do it if you're on one of the rows where you do it near the beginning. So again, they will be on the same side. So what I'm showing you is not what it's supposed to look like. You're going to have one right here, and then you'll eventually work your way, and you'll have one that matches up on the same side here. Okay, so if you're on a row where the opening is at the beginning, then you're going to work single crochet back loop only through just those first 3 stitches. But then you do exactly the same thing you did as we did earlier here. You're going to chain 3, skip your next 3 stitches, and then starting in the next one, we'll single crochet through the back loop only. And then keep doing that all the way across. And that's how you then place the opening at the beginning of the row. So with all of that information, how to make the ribbing stitches, how to do the opening at the end or the beginning, and making sure that they match on the same side of our ribbing, you now have all the information you need to be able to finish up working up your waistband. So I'm going to go ahead and work mine up off camera, and then I'll join you back to talk about how to take your waistband and your drawstring and put it all together to create the final waistband. And now I've got my entire waistband ribbing worked up. So you can see here I've got my 2 drawstring hole openings in the center, and then I've got my last row completed over here. So now it's time for us to join this into a circle so that way it forms the actual waistband. So to do this, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and then without twisting our band, we're going to match up this last row of our single crochets and then this first row of chain stitches that we had along here. And what we're going to do is lay the last row on top of those chains like so, and then we're going to be slip stitching them together to create this kind of almost invisible seam right here, so it looks like it's just continuous ribbing going all the way around. So to do that, what we're going to look for is each one of the stitches on this row is going to match up with a chain from this row. Now, if it's not 100% perfectly exact, that is okay. You can just do your best to get them as lined up as possible. If you find that you do mess up and it doesn't quite look as good, just undo it and start over. It's not meant to be this like super frustrating thing, but you'll just go nice and slow working through this. So the first thing I'll do is locate my first stitch here, and I'm going to insert my hook into both or under both loops of that stitch. Then going through this first row, I'm going to insert my hook also through that first chain here. Then I'm going to yarn over and just slip stitch through everything. And I can do this in one move, or if I need to, I can also do it in 3 moves. I can pull it first through that first row, then through my last row stitch, then through the loop that's on my hook, and there we go. Slip stitch complete. I then continue going down. So I find my next stitch here, and I will insert my hook through both loops of that stitch, as well as through the next chain from that first row. So that's going to be this one right here. So I'll insert my hook, yarn over, pull my yarn through everything, and now I've slip stitched 2 stitches together. And then I just keep going, finding my next one, my third stitch, that third chain, yarn over, pull through everything. Now, as this is going to continue, this yarn is going to be moving down the back of your work. So at some point in time, you're going to be inserting your hook and you're not going to really be able to see what's going on. All you do is just turn your work, see where your yarn is, grab it, and then you can turn it right back around. So I'll demonstrate that with this one. Even though it's not difficult to see quite yet, I'm going to pretend it is. So we've got this stitch here that I'm going to go through, followed by this next unworked chain here. And if I'm like, oh, I can't see my yarn, turn it around, find my yarn right here, yarn over, and then I can pull it through and then kind of flip everything back and then just keep pulling it through everything here. And if you just keep going slowly, you'll eventually get all the way to the end and you're going to have all 19 of your stitches joined together. And then after that, you're going to be ready for the next part, which is going to be doing the fold over. Okay, I've just finished seaming up my entire waistband here and I'm ready to do my fold. So what we're going to do is we'll notice that the yarn is now kind of coming through our waistband. All we just do is just reach through, grab our yarn ball, pull it through, and now it's ready to continue working. So once we have seamed that all up, we're going to turn our work to where our yarn and our hook are near the top. And then we're going to kind of locate where these drawstring holes are. And we're going to figure out how to fold it to where these are going to be on the front. So if I fold it like this, okay, it looks like this would be the front. So I am going to be on the front side here, which is exactly what I want because I want the front side to be the right side that I'm working. So if you fold it from the front to the back here, then you should be all good. Now, for this next part, what we're going to be doing is grabbing two things. One, we're going to be switching out our hook for our bigger one because we're now going to be working in the main body. So I'm grabbing my F hook, my 3.75 millimeter. And you're also going to want to grab your drawstring that you finished up because we're going to be wrapping it inside of our folded waistband. So to do this, what I actually do is go ahead and get a couple of these started and then I incorporate my drawstring. So what we're going to be doing is when we fold these sides together, we're going to see that the ridges here need to match up with the same ridge on the other side. So to do this, what I'm going to do is kind of follow where I see that there's this ridge that's right here. I'm going to kind of fold to where that's kind of that little valley that's right here because the ridge on this side matches with a valley on this side. And then just match it up like so. And then if I look on the other side, I can see, okay, yeah, those two valleys match up and the two ridges match up that are on opposite sides. So once I establish that they're matched up, I'm then going to chain one. And then I'm going to single crochet through both sides of my waistband edging. And I'm going to be doing one single crochet into the side of each row. Now this is just kind of like eyeballing what looks right to you. So for me, what I do is I'll locate in next to each ridge, we've got this kind of like one big kind of open gap right there. And then we kind of have this more like kind of clustered closed one that's right about here. And then on the opposite side, sorry, let me match it up again here. And then on the opposite side, you can see kind of the same thing. We've got the more open one kind of right here, and then the more closed ones kind of right here. So if you just kind of go off of that, then that'll help you kind of match up the sides of the rows more easily. So what I'm going to do is insert my hook first through this kind of thicker cluster, because that's the first end of a row here. And also through that corresponding one on the opposite side, right there. Then I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then that is my first single crochet. Then I just do the same thing into the next ones. Insert my hook through that kind of more thin loop, and then through the thinner one on the other side, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And I have now single crocheted 2 rows together. And then you just keep doing that, going through the next 2 rows together. And then through the next 2 rows together, and just keep single crocheting all the way across. Now, one thing you might do is, just to keep track, you might put a stitch marker here in this very first single crochet. So then that way, when you get all the way around to the very beginning, you know where you've ended, and you can start, or you can end your round there. But at this point, what I've done is I now have like a little bit established here. I can go ahead and grab my drawstring, and since it's going to be folded like this, yeah, there we go. We're going to have one end of the drawstring coming out this way, and the other end coming out on the opposite side here. There we go. And then without them twisting or anything like that. So it's going to, oh, well, I guess I need to string it through here first. So I'm going to string my drawstring through there first. Then have it come out through here. And there we go. Now, what I can do is, as I work my single crochets, stitching each of these sides together, I'm just making sure that the drawstring stays on the inside here. And then as I go, that means that I won't have to try to string the drawstring through after it's all been closed up. And then by the time you get to the end, the number of single crochets that you'll have should match the same number of rows as your waistband. So I'm going to go ahead and work up the rest of this, and then I will meet you back to talk about how to join and begin working the next round. I have just now finished working around my entire waistband. We can see I've got my drawstring coming out of the drawstring holes there, and it's wrapped securely inside of here, nice and stretchy. And I've already removed the stitch marker, but I am now about to work a slip stitch into this very first single crochet to finish joining the round. Once I do that, I'm then going to turn my work, and we're ready to begin our setup round to get us started on our main shorts body. So to do this, what we're going to note is that the slip stitch we just made will not count as any kind of stitch. It's just going to be there. So the single crochet to the left here for me is going to be my first stitch. And then the one to the right here is going to be my last stitch of the round. And this slip stitch is not going to be anything. So for this first setup round, what I'm going to do is chain 2. And that is going to count as a single crochet plus a chain 1. Then I'm going to skip this first stitch and this second one, because this first one is basically going to count as kind of like if I had worked a single crochet into it. So then I'll skip this next one. So skip these first two. And in this third stitch, we're actually going to work just a regular single crochet. And then what I might do is grab a stitch marker and place it into that chain space that we just made so that I know when I get back around here that that was the very first chain space. Then we're going to repeat around the same thing. We're going to chain one, skip the next single crochet into the next one. Chain one, skip one, single crochet. Chain one, skip one, single crochet. So that's all you do all the way around for this setup round. So I'm going to go ahead and work mine off camera, and I'll meet you back when I get to the end, and we'll talk about how to begin the hip shaping. I'm coming now around to the end, and I have one more to skip, and then once I skip that one, that would end up at my very first chain space. So I'm exactly where I need to be. So all I do for this is insert my hook into that first chain space and slip stitch to join. Then I'm going to go ahead and remove this stitch marker, because I'm going to be using that to mark my first chain space of this next round. But before we do that, we actually have to do some other stitch marker placement because we're about to do some hip shaping. So what's going to happen is there's going to be some shaping happening here at the join, but there's also going to be shaping happening here on the sides. So there's going to be some growth on both ends to increase for our hip shape so that it can go around the butt. So in the pattern, it's going to tell you how to calculate out how many spaces you need to go from the join, and then you'll place stitch markers. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my stitch markers here. So if I look here at where the join is, we can see to either side, this is the chain space to the right, this is the chain space to the left, and the join is right here in the middle. So from here, I'm going to count outward the number of spaces that I calculate out for my size. So for me, it's going to be 21 spaces. So from here, I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 18, 19, 20, 21. And in that space, I'm going to place a stitch marker. And then when I go back to the join, I do the same thing going in the opposite direction. So starting here, this first one counts as 1. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And if you're not quite sure what a chain space might look like in here, if we notice here, the single crochets are going to be these little V's that have like these little legs coming out. And in between those are going to be the chain spaces. So that's how you can kind of tell where the chain spaces are on the single crochet rounds. So that's how I'm able to figure out how to count and then place my stitch marker. And then if I kind of zoom out here, I can see that they're placed at relatively equal spots. They're going to be slightly closer to the back side than so they're not going to be exactly on the halfway points on either side. They're going to be slightly less than that so that the shaping is all happening more towards the rear. And so then the front is going to stay relatively flat. All right. Once we have those placed, we are now ready to begin our hip shaping. And to do that, we're going to start with our treble crochet round. So now we're going to be working in our established stitch pattern, which is going to start with a treble crochet round. Then the next round is going to be double, then it's going to be half double, then it's going to be single, and then it just repeats that. And then throughout this part, we're going to be doing increasing to create that hip shaping. So you're going to calculate in your pattern the number of increased rounds you need to work, but regardless of the number of rounds, you're going to increase the exact same way. So in this very first space right here, we're actually going to slip stitch. And then we're going to chain 5. What this chain 5 counts as is a treble crochet plus a chain 1. And then I'm going to go into my next space and I'm going to work an increase. So this increase is just going to be working a treble crochet, chain 1, and then a treble crochet back into that same chain space. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker here in this very first space that we created. So that way I know that's the beginning of the round. And then once that increase is made, I then chain 1 and then just work the established stitch pattern, which is just going to be a treble crochet in each chain space, followed by a chain 1. And I'll keep doing that until I get to my very first stitch marked space. I have now reached my first stitch marked space, and so in these spaces I'm going to be working an increase again. So just like I did here at the beginning, I'm going to do a treble crochet into that chain space. Then I'm going to chain 1 and then work another treble crochet into that same chain space. Then what I'll do is replace my stitch marker back into the space I just made. And then I'm able to continue my established stitch pattern again by doing a chain 1 and then just working treble crochets into every space until I get around to the next, oh sorry, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. To the next stitch marked space where I will do exactly the same thing I just did here. So then I'm going to work all that up. I'm going to get all the way back around to the beginning of the round, and then I'll meet you back up to talk about the next round. I have now worked to where I'm almost done with this round, but we have one more increase we need to do. Just like how we increased on the beginning of our round, we're going to need to do an increase at the end here to keep those increases at the middle of the back of our shorts equal on both sides. So for this round, we are going to be doing our treble crochets until we get to the very last chain space here. So in this very last chain space, we're going to work another increase like we did here at the beginning. So I'm just going to do a treble crochet, chain 1, treble crochet, then I'm going to chain 1 and then slip stitch into this very first space to finish the round. Once I do that, I'm going to take out my beginning of round stitch marker because I'm about to start my next round, which is going to be a double crochet round. So we're going to work the double crochet round very similarly to how we did the treble crochet round. So we're going to start by slip stitching into this very first space here. Then we're going to chain 4. And that will count as our first double crochet plus a chain 1. Then in the next space, we're going to do another increase. So to increase with a double crochet round is exactly the same as the treble. You just simply work a double, chain 1, double in the same space. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and place my beginning of round marker back into the very first space we created, just to make it easier for myself. And then we're going to work that established pattern. We're just going to chain 1, double crochet in each chain space until we reach the next stitch marker. And then once we get to that stitch marker, we just do another increase like before. So I'll take that stitch marker out, work my increase with double crochets, and then place that stitch marker back into that space, and then continue working around. And then we're going to do that all the way until we get towards the end, where we're going to need to do one more increase before we finish this round. All right, I'm done working my side increases and I'm now towards the end here. So on the double crochet rounds, you're actually going to work an increase in the second to last space. So we're going to be working in this V here where we had our increase for our treble crochets. So we're going to just double crochet like normal until we get to that space. And then in this next space, I'm going to work my increase. So place a double, chain one, double. Then I'm going to chain one, double crochet into this very last space. And then I'm back to the beginning. So I'm going to do a chain one and then slip stitch into that very first space. And I'm now finished with my double crochet round. I'm going to go ahead and take out my beginning of round stitch marker here. I'm going to turn my work, and it's now time to begin the half double crochet round. So the half double crochet round is going to be worked basically the same way. We're going to start by slip stitching into this first space here. And this time only chaining 3 to count as a half double crochet plus a chain 1. Then we're going to place an increase in the next space. So that'll be a half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. And it's starting to get a little tight because of the fact that it's a half double crochet, so they're getting shorter. But if I kind of pinch and spread them out a bit, we can see there's that space in between the two half double crochets, creating our increase. And then there's the first space of our round. So I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker here. And then one thing to note is you'll probably see that this increase does not line up with the previous 2 rounds increases, and that is by design. The increases here at the join are not going to continue going out like this. They're just going to continue spreading out from the center as we go. So those are not going to line up every time. It's just going to be 2 on top, and then it's going to stagger 2 on top, then 2 on top again, and it's just going to keep staggering back and forth. So if they don't line up perfectly, that's on purpose. So just so you know, if you're like, wait a minute, am I putting it in the right spot? Yes, you are. Okay, so once you do that, your increase is now done. We are now going to chain 1 and just half double crochet into each space around. And then working an increase in each of our chain or our marked spaces, which at this point I think you pretty much get, so I'm not going to keep showing that on here, but I am going to show you where you're going to place your final increase of the round once I get back to the end. I've worked my way around and I'm almost done with this round. And we can see here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more spaces left. So I'm just going to be working a half double crochet in each of the next 3. And then I will work my increase in this very last space here. Notice that I am again bypassing this increase that was right here because they're not going to be lined up on this side either, just like at the beginning. So I'm just going to do my 3 half double crochets and chain 1s. Then in this last space, work my increase. Followed by doing a chain 1 and then slip stitching into my very first space and completing the round. Once I do that, I'm ready for the 4th and final established stitch pattern. Now that does not mean it's my final increase round because the number of increase rounds again is dependent on your body shaping and the calculations you do in your pattern. So once we do this 4th round, if you still need to do some more increases, you'll keep reworking these until you reach the end of those. And then you'll just continue working the established stitch pattern without any increases. But for now, this one final round of increasing I'm going to show is going to be the single crochet one. So just like before, we're going to slip stitch into that first space. This time I'm only going to be chaining 2 to count as a single plus a chain 1. And then in the next space, which happens to be the increase from the round below, I'm going to work an increase of single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. And just like before, they are kind of short, maybe a little harder to see the spaces, but if you kind of pinch them and spread them out, we can see that this first set of chain 2s should be our space there. And then we've got our 2 V's that indicate the 2 single crochets and then the chain space that's in between. Once I do that, I then just continue the same way I did on the previous rounds, working my increase in each of the marked spaces here. And then when I get all the way around to the end here, I'm going to work my last increase of the round in this little V space, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, slip stitch to join at the beginning of the round. So because all of that is pretty similar to what we've already seen with the previous rounds, I'm just going to go ahead and work all that off camera. And then after this, you're going to continue your hip shaping. But then after your hip shaping is complete, you're then just going to work without any increasing. You're just going to be working treble, double, half double, single until you reach the full crotch depth of your shorts. Once you reach that and we're ready to begin splitting for the legs, I will meet you back up and talk about how to work that part. All right, I finished working up my hip shaping and my non-increase rounds as well until I reached the crotch depth that I needed. And I did have to switch colors because I did run out of yarn. So, just so you know, that's why you see a different color here. I also left my hook that I was using at work. So I had to go into my stash and find another hook here that's the exact same size. So if you see those differences, we're still working on the same pair of shorts. Don't you worry. But now, once we get to our crotch depth, it is time for us to work on splitting for the legs. So this part can be a little confusing if you've never had to split to make a garment before, like in a sweater or a pair of shorts, but I will be walking you through all the steps that you'll need to do that. So what I've done is I've ended on a treble crochet round. So every size, no matter what, is going to end on a treble crochet round once they reach the crotch depth that they need. So then that way the instructions were a little easier to follow as well. So then we're going to go ahead and turn our work. I'm going to take out my beginning of round stitch marker. And then once I do that, I'm going to slip stitch into this first space just like we would normally. And I'm going to chain 4 to count as my double crochet plus a chain 1. Then I'll work double crochet, chain 1 in each space around. But what I'm going to do is I'm only going to work half the number of chain spaces as what my total number of spaces is here. So for example, as I mark my first space here, I have 120 chain spaces after I finished all of my increases. And so that means half of that is going to be 60. So right now I've already worked 3, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to be working 60 total chain spaces. Once I do that, I'm going to meet you back up and talk about what to do next. I just finished working up 60 chain spaces around, so I should end with this final double crochet. And then what I'm going to do is place a stitch marker into that last double crochet I made. Because that's going to mark where we are about to do our split. So to do our split, what we're going to do is skip all of these remaining chain spaces because those are going to be part of the second leg. And what we've done is we've just worked the first part of the first leg around here. So now, instead of working those spaces, we're actually going to skip across the center back to the beginning of the round as if we had worked all the way back around. So I'm going to kind of orient it to where if I had worked all the way around, I'm going to be coming back to this side. So the double crochet round is a wrong side round, so make sure that you have the wrong side facing as if you were about to work. But the thing is, if we just try to jump straight across, that's going to pinch the center of it too tightly, and we need a little bit of space to go underneath in between our legs. So in order to do that, we're going to create a chain that goes across that center part between our legs, and then we're going to join here. Now in your pattern, it's going to tell you how to calculate how long to make this chain, but this is also very adjustable for your own comfort level. Like if you want a smaller one or a really big one for looser or tighter legs, that is up to you and you can kind of play around with that. As long as you always have an odd number of chains, because that's going to maintain this like chain spacing that we have established here with our pattern. So for me, I need 9 chains. So I'm going to chain 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I do chain those a little loosely because we are going to be going back and working in them. And then once I do that, I skip across to my beginning of round. And just like before, we're going to slip stitch into that chain space. And then once I do that, I should now have this opening right here where we've got all the stitches we just worked, plus the chain and the join. That forms our first leg. So now we're only going to be working around this first leg section, and we're going to leave these remaining stitches over here unworked until later. All right. Once we do that, we are now ready to begin round 2 of our leg. So to do round 2, we're going to be working our half double crochet round. So I'm going to turn, and the first thing I'm going to see are these chains. So we're going to be working across this chain here, but we're going to need to make sure we do it correctly to get our established stitch pattern with our half double crochets and our chain 1 spaces. So notice that our double crochet over here is still marked, and then next to that is the first chain. So we've got this marked double crochet here. Then we have our first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, and then if we kind of twist it here, there's our 9th chain right there. So that is going to be the first chain that I need to slip stitch into. So I'm going to insert my hook into just that first chain here. It can be a little fiddly, but once you get it in there, you then just yarn over and slip stitch just as if we did from the other times when we just work a slip stitch into the first chain space. This counts kind of as our first chain space. Once I do that, I will then chain 3 to count as a half double crochet plus a chain 1. Then I'm going to find my next chain here, and I'm going to skip that one, and then I'm going to work in the one after that. So I've worked in the first one, I'm skipping the second one, and I'm working a half double crochet into the third chain. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and place my beginning of round stitch marker in my chain 3 space here that counted as my first half double crochet plus a chain 1. And then I'm going to repeat that again. We're going to skip this 4th chain, and in the next chain we're going to work a half double crochet. And then I'm going to chain 1, skip the next chain, work a half double crochet in the next one, and you just keep doing that until you've worked a half double crochet into this very last chain before the double crochet. Now, if you find that you are not working a half double crochet in the last one, or you have an extra one left over, then that means that you need to go back and find where you maybe forgot to skip a chain or something like that, because you should always end up with your half double crochet in this last chain, because then when you chain one, the next stitch you skip is the double crochet itself, and then you work your next half double crochet in the chain space. And now we're ready to continue just like we've been doing before, where we're just working half double crochets in the chain spaces around. And so that helps continue that nice half double crochet chain one space pattern that we've had in the previous rows. So that's how you work the chain. That's how you work across the chain. And then we're going to work around just this one leg until we get back to the beginning. So I'm going to work that off camera, and then I'll meet you back to make sure we're in the right spot and we're ending in the right place. I'm coming around now to the end. So I've got this last space right here before the chain. And then if I look, I can see that I've got my beginning of round chain right here. And so I'm going to be working my final chain one and slip stitch into there. And again, leaving the rest of all of this unworked. So we'll slip stitch into that very first chain space. And now I have just finished working the half double crochet round of just this one leg. And I'm ready to continue working the established stitch pattern around just this section for the remainder of this leg. So I'm going to show you how to kind of start that. We're going to turn our work. And just like before, since I have that, okay, there we go. Yep, that's my first chain space right here. I'm going to slip stitch into that one. And then I'm going to chain two to count as a single crochet plus a chain one. And then I'm going to single crochet into the next chain space. And then chain one, single crochet into the next chain space, chain one, etc., etc. And I'm going to go ahead and take my beginning of round marker here, place that into that first chain space that I created here. There we go. And now I'm ready to continue working all the way around. So I'm going to work around and then show you once I get to the part that went across the chain. I'm going to show you how to work across that just to make sure we know exactly where we need to be going. All right, I'm almost to the half double crochets that were worked across the chain here where we split. And just to kind of show you, I want to make sure that everything is aligned nice and flat. Sometimes this middle part can kind of twist on you. Just make sure that you untwist and flatten everything out so that you can see clearly where those chain spaces are. It can sometimes be a bit confusing and you might flip it upside down or something, but as long as you follow along where these chain spaces line up, they should continue to line up across that chain as well. So that'll help you make sure that you're orienting everything correctly. So I'm working into those chain spaces now across. And I should now be back at my beginning of round since I'm done working in this last chain space and I've got this chain space here. I can now go ahead and slip stitch into that first space and my next round is complete. And then all I do is turn, slip stitch into this first space again. And now I'm ready to do my treble crochet round. And now I'm back to basically doing exactly the same thing I was doing when I was working my main body. So you're going to keep doing that until you work whatever length of leg you want. So you could do like a 3-inch seam, a 5-inch seam, an 11-inch seam, just depending on how long you want your leg to be. But regardless of how long you want it, you're going to do a complete number of repeats. So what that means is you're going to work all the repeats until you end on a single crochet round. So whatever amount that is, whether it's 1 repeat, 2 repeats, 4 repeats, whatever, always make sure you're ending your final repeat on a single crochet round. So I'm going to work up the remainder of this leg, and then I will go back to you to talk about how to finish off with your half double crochet border. I have just finished working up the length of my leg. I have ended on a single crochet round. I've already slip stitched into the first space and I have turned. So now it's time for me to do my half double crochet border. So on your leg, when you work your border, you're going to start by slip stitching into that first space, just like normal. But then you're only going to chain 1 and it's not going to count as a space or a stitch at all. It's just going to be a little kind of like turning chain here. And then we're going to half double crochet into the same space we just slip stitched into. So I'm going to yarn over, go into that space, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3, and now our half double crochet is done. So I'm going to take my beginning of round marker and place it in that half double crochet. And now I'm going to work a half double crochet in every single crochet and chain 1 space all the way around. So I'm not doing any chain 1 and skipping or anything like that. We're just working straight half double crochets across. So I've already worked in this first space. So next I'm going to work in this single crochet. As a reminder, the single crochets are going to be the ones that have these V's. So they'll have the 2 legs coming out of the space below. So I'll insert my hook in between those legs and pull up my loop. Oh, sorry, there's like a stray fiber there. Okay. And then once I do that, I'm going to yarn over and pull through 3. And then I just keep doing that into the next space. So that's in between these 2 single crochets here. And then into the next single crochet where the legs are popping out. And then just keep doing that all the way around until I get back to the beginning. I'm coming now to the end here. I'm about to reach the very first half double crochet of the round. So I have this chain space here. And then we've also got this kind of join here where there was a single crochet. Honestly, if you can't quite get your hook into anything like that, it's okay if you just kind of skip that one. It doesn't really matter. You can try to get it in there if you want to, but for me, I find that it's okay because once I'm done with this, I go ahead and just insert my hook into that very first stitch and slip stitch together. And it kind of just covers that little gap anyway. Once we do that, we are then going to fasten off our yarn, pull it through, and then I'm going to remove my stitch marker. And then what you can do at this point is you can take your yarn end and you can get your yarn needle and weave it in. Or if you want to save that part for later, you can as well. But now that you've done that, we are now finished with our first leg, including the border. To join for the second leg, what we're going to do is locate our marked double crochet here. And we can see here that I've got it right here. And we can see that this double crochet is extended here and goes into this chain space right here. So what we're going to do is be picking up by joining into this double crochet and then finishing up working around the part of the leg that we left when we did the split. So first thing that you need to make sure you are is on the wrong side of our work because this is the double crochet round. So we want to make sure that that stays on the wrong side, just like all the other double crochet rounds. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my yarn here. Okay. and we're going to find that marked double crochet. And what we're going to do is insert our hook into that double crochet. And here we are. Once we do that, we're then going to grab our yarn, pull through and create a loop, and then we're going to chain one to act like the next chain space that skips across this next double crochet that's right here. So to do that, what I like to do just to kind of secure it is I'll slip stitch using both strands of our active yarn and our tail just to keep it from slipping around. Once I do that, I go ahead and drop the tail, and that's going to count as our first chain space. And then we're going to work in the next unworked chain space here. So remember, this one right here was already worked from the previous leg. So we're going to pick up right here in this next space by doing a double crochet. And then we're going to chain one and then double crochet in the next one. And now we're able to continue working around this part of the leg, just like we did earlier on the first leg. And then what we'll do is we'll work all the way around. And then when we get back here, I'm going to show you where you're going to finish off this round. Okay, I've come around to the end, and it can look a bit like a lot of a mess, but if you just read your stitches very closely, you can find exactly what you're looking for. So we can see I've been working in these chain spaces. So there's a chain space, and then here's a chain space. And then when I find my next chain space here, we can see that there's already something coming out of it. So this is the last chain space I will be working into. And then this is the last chain space of our first leg. So that's going to be what the pattern is talking about when it says slip stitch into the last chain space of the first leg before the split. And it's talking about how here, this is where the split happened, since those are our half double crochets along the chain. If we can see that right here, that's where the split was. So this was the last space that was made before that split. So that's going to be where I slip stitch into once I get to the end after working in these next two spaces. So I'm going to work my last two double crochets in these two spaces, including a final chain one, and then I'm going to slip stitch into this space, and then I'm going to turn my work, and now I'm ready to begin working the half double crochet round of my second leg. So to do that, we are now going to find our first space here, which is right here, and we're going to slip stitch into that one. And then we're going to chain 3, and that will count as our half double crochet plus a chain 1. And then we're going to half double crochet and chain 1 around in each space of this second leg. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put my beginning of round stitch marker into that first space. That will especially be helpful when I get back around to working across this chain and knowing exactly where I need to end. So I'm going to work half double crochets in every space around until I get close to where we joined for the second leg. And then I'll show you where you need to be working your stitches to get across that chain. All right, I am coming now towards where we did our join here. And I'm just going to show where we need to be working our stitches. So we can see we've got that chain space that we created after we did our join into this double crochet that I still have marked here. So I've got 1, 2, 3 more spaces to work into. So I'm going to work my half double crochets into those next 3. And then where I need to start working is going to be along this chain. So this chain is the one that was already worked across when we did our first leg. So you can see over here, we've got those half double crochets coming out of the chain, but we're going to be working across the opposite side of the chain. And what's helpful is we can see everywhere that the half double crochets were worked, those are exactly the same spots we need to work the half double crochets for the round for this second leg. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've worked into that chain space that was created using our join here, we're going to chain 1, and then I'm going to find the first chain that our first half double crochet was worked into. So if we look along the chain, we can find our half double crochets. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then I'm going to work my next half double crochet in the same chain that this one is coming out of. So I'm going to yarn over, insert into that same chain, pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Then I'm going to chain 1 and then find my next one to work into, which is this one right here. Yarn over, insert my hook into that same chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3, and it will automatically be skipping these chains that we skipped earlier when we worked the half double crochets on the first leg. So you don't have to worry about trying to find which chain to work into when the ones we need to work into are already widened out by the half double crochets we worked before. So that's just a great tip for helping you make sure that you're working your half double crochets in the right spots. Once we get across to here, this is going to be the last chain we're going to work into here. We should now be far enough along that we're back to the beginning of the round. So now that I've done that, we're going to skip all of this because this is all part of the first leg stuff. We're just going to skip across and slip stitch into that first space. And now we've completed the half double crochet round of our second leg. Once we do that, we're ready to turn. Sorry, there we go. I'll actually take that stitch marker out because I'm going to be moving it again anyway. There we go. So I will turn my work, and now we're ready to begin the single crochet round. Starting with this chain space that we ended with, we're going to slip stitch in that just like we normally do. And then we're going to chain 2 to count as our single crochet plus a chain 1. And then we're going to work in the chain spaces here, just single crochets across that chain, or across these half double crochets. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that first space again. There we go. And then we're able to work the second leg exactly the same way as we did the first leg. So we're just going to be working around just this part, single crocheting around, and then we're going to get back to this beginning of round 1. And so there's no longer any weird spots where we have to insert our hook in a special place or any spots where we have to like pay attention. Now that we've gotten the half double crochets established, the single crochet round will just continue like normal, and then all repeat rounds will continue like normal as well. So you pretty much now have everything you need to be able to work the second leg. So you'll work it exactly the same way, the exact same number of rounds, that half double crochet border and everything, and then you'll have a matching set of legs. You'll fasten off, and then you're actually done with your shorts. After that, you can then launder and block it to fit to your measurements, but otherwise you're pretty much done once you're done with this leg. And with that, you have everything you need to know to finish your shorts, and so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I hope that you did find this tutorial video helpful. If you did, please make sure you give it a thumbs up to let YouTube know that you like it. It really helps me out. And then also feel free to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification so that you can be alerted every time there's a new tutorial video for one of my new patterns. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.